Welcome back to the Raven Chronicles with Moonin and Hugin. We are doing part two today of leaving the uniform and the evolution after the uniform. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
So nobody knows this, but Jason took like 50 retake on the last one. No, I'm kidding. He took like three of them. One, he was
Three or
not
four.
looking. The other one, he was babbling. The third one tried to speak French for some odd reason. I was not understanding that part. I was not understanding what he's saying in French either, but that's just how it is. So today we're to part two, right, of what happened when we leave the uniform, right?
Yes.
And I mean, last time we talked way too much, so this time, so people don't get bored, we have a timer. We're gonna follow timer, so you
Oh
can
yeah, I
have a
better set a timer so we don't go for like 3 hours of.
you know it a little 45 minutes just so you don't get too bored with us and we don't ramble too much because God knows. There we go. um so I'm gonna throw it like this because it happened this week. And I pick up my son every day, drop him off every day. And why is this? And I know, Jason, you're in the same kind of um pattern. Let's go with that.
Yeah, basically.
um we're father at home, right?
Yep.
Like we're in the recovery process, the rehab process, and so on and so forth, of what is going to look like in the future, because we're not going to wear the uniform. Well, the decision is there. So it's either under whatever the work compensation aspect, the veterans affair aspect, but it all kind of fall under the same thing. We
Yep.
have to follow suit on therapy, rehabilitation if there's a physical injury, and so on and so forth. And when that time's gonna say that we're fixed after 55 assessment from different psychologists, millions of pills, or whatever we're gonna call that, we're gonna have the green light, and then hopefully being able to return to work. Or if we're diminished capacity, well, it's gonna be something else, and that's time's gonna tell at that point. So
Yep.
this week I picked up my kid. I think it was 2 days ago. And it kind of threw me off like big time. And I told you that, Jason, because
Yeah.
it was you have two kids as well. You have two, right? Three. See, I cannot do
Three
three.
that I know of.
Yeah, well, that's a start, right? And I mean,
Mm.
hopefully it's it, right? Um, I said to my wife I would be sniff up after two. She refused. She wanted a third one, so we're at war right now.
Mm.
But
That's how our third one. That's how our third one came. So, before we digress too far into
yeah, the babies
tangent
aspect.
lines again, yeah, yeah.
So what happened this week? Picked up my kid. My kid had a little bruise on his face, and on his cheek, and I was like, well, "What's going on?" Right? Because I know bullies happen in school. I know, he's a boy or boy. Sometimes they just got roughed off, and actually, it was a little girl who punched him in the face, and I was like, "What happened?" And he's like, "Well, I told her that I wanted her to kill me." And at first, I was kind of not sure. And he was saying that without feeling. So I was like, well, it's not a big deal, but, let's just dig around to know what is going on with this. So we kept talking and kept digging. And he's like, well, you remember when I was smaller, you were very angry at everyone. And I would like to die for that reason. Now, I understand the positive that he spoke and so on and so forth, but at 5 years old should not be something we speak about, right? Or even imagine or picture or whatever not that is. So obviously, I took the steps for this, contacted like support and whatnot. We're gonna have a psychologist who's gonna look after him. We have someone coming Friday and assess the kid and so on and so forth. It was, as a parent, number one, was extremely hard. As a father who did that damage, right? Because it's damage. The guilt obviously kicked back in, shame, guilt, and whatsoever. But um, we don't want to damage our kids. And that's one of the reasons why we do those jobs. We want them safer. We want
Hmm.
them, in a better type of life than we have, right? Less hardship, although the hardship are the key to grow uh, outside of everything, right? That is recovery, or that's just life, or being older. And I remember texting you, Jason, on that aspect. I'm like, maybe we should bring that up because it also not only affect our kids, but it affect our spouse, um, which they live with us. And in between this, we are changing. because the
Hmm.
person you used to be before getting this a diagnosis was a person who was totally wearing a mask, was like ignoring, avoiding whatever the signs that we have, and our spouse got used to that person. Now, the heart of therapy, which is a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is for you, 5 years, 10 years, there's no limits. That's the recovery where there's a lot of pieces that are changing, which is
Yeah, big
very
time.
interesting. Yeah. And in the aftermath, which is when you're in a rehabilitation, because the recovery is kind of past and you still kind of poof everything and makes everything fine and better, um, you're that new person, right?
Yeah.
So we're changing hats 3 times. And something that I think we have to mention is our spouse have to adapt to a new person
Yeah.
and fall in love with that person, which might not be the case.
Yeah. Well, you kind of bring up the point, like we said on the phone, that so I want to back up a little bit before I
Yeah,
make the point. Your son is 5 years old, right?
correct. Yeah.
So clearly, what he's expressing is something, but has nothing really to do with death and dying
No.
and murder. No, he's trying to express probably anger or sorrow or pain in some way,
Mm-hmm.
and he's using words that adults say. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I'm satisfied that that's not a serious thing, though I don't know anything about it. But I've heard my kids say that, and I had a little incident like that with my oldest son. He's 13 now, but when he was 8 years old, he said something similar. And I don't know really where he got it from, unless it was from me. And the kind of the point that I wanted to get at, which is really funny because of what your son said, was we got into the job we do, police, military, law enforcement of some kind, emergency services. We get into that job to help people. And often, many of us are changed, not for the better, but for the worse because of the job.
Yep.
And so here we are trying to create a better environment for everybody to live in the in the communities that we police, or in the the country that we defend if it's in the military. And at the same time, if we're not careful and if we're not wise to see what's happening to us as the officer, we are being diminished, and then we're bringing that stuff home,
Mm-hmm.
and it's affecting our home life in some way. And so your son is saying something possibly in response to what you said was this anger that you were bringing home because of the symptoms of your trauma, because of the mental illness that you were struggling from, or because of the jaded nature that comes along with being in policing or in the military. So that's the great paradox, I think, when we're talking about leaving the uniform and the evolution of it. It is one of the things that you bring with you is the baggage of the uniform, the baggage of the job, and that can poison and tarnish your family. And so one of the things that you have to work on in evolving from not wearing the uniform is that very thing, the thing that changed you, the thing that made you somebody else, the thing that twisted who you were until you were something completely different, and then you had to re-evolve or change again. So like um I'll be 20 years into my career as of March, and that's half my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're talking about how this affects the family. And when we were having a conversation offline, we were talking about how our wives have said many times that they don't know who we are anymore, that we've had to change so drastically to come back to some form of normalcy, that we've left behind the person that we were. And my wife and I have been together now for 11 years, so it's been 9 years of me slowly, I would say, devolving to the person that I was before I started to get help. And now over the last 2 years or so, my wife has had to watch this entire transition of me re-becoming something that I previously wasn't. It's not even who I used to be. It's like a newer, an upgraded program, and she doesn't recognize a lot of who I am anymore. And so at the core for my wife, not really my children, and I'll get to that, and I'm sure you will too. Not really for my kids, but at the core, I think I still am me in some way. The things that are really rooted in what I identify as Jason are still there, but
The values.
The values and the ethics are there. Yeah, that's right, John. But all of the things that are external, all of the things that are sort of caught up in that gravity are the things that I'm changing that my wife doesn't recognize in me. And you spoke on that. So I'll let you take the floor because your children are seeing something in you and your wife is seeing something in you and you're evolving away from that. And in doing so, you have to kind of repair the damage that you caused. Right. And I'm mature enough to know that I caused a lot of damage
Yeah.
in my family
Yeah.
from the mental illness perspective, from the way that I was treating myself and the people in my family. So, yeah, take the floor, John, and let me hear from you because you had some good points when we were talking.
So number one, I don't remember the points because one of the thing that comes often is the
Short
lack
term
of.
memory loss.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
don't have that, and it's super interesting because I used to remember everything, right? Like I could tell my
Yeah.
wife the sand was that color, or we were there at that time, and now it's her correcting me, so it's kind of interesting. And I mean, one of the things she brought, she's like at we kind of pictured it as before diagnosis, 2 years of hell and recovery process, right?
Yep.
That's kind of how we word it at home. Number one, why? Because that 2 years I have no memory. So, and it's not me walking away from what I've done because I have an amount of shame and guilt towards this that is unbelievable. But the human, the brain always goes for the easy piece, right? At first. And at first I needed to read. So there's a bunch of books right there and it was PTSD and I need to figure out what I have and I need to save myself, right?
Yep.
Because well, we're just doing a job. Police officer is finding a solution for people who can't. That's pretty much it, right?
Yep.
That is taking a person to jail or taking a person away from the other or whatever the hell maybe it could be. Um, and I needed to find a solution for me. I didn't want to, go through the process of finding a psychologist and so on and so forth, and pills and what am I supposed to expect. Um, so there's kind of a big lack of anything and everything. And my wife told me recently, she's like, your son, and she always mentioned your son because he looks like me, not physically, but the rest is me. Like he has that piss poor character personality that he will argue with everyone who walks at 5 years old. Um,
Yep.
and but he has a small memory as well, and that's the ADHD part, then the neurodivergent that kicks in. And she's like, I have to repeat to him 10 times, I have to repeat to you 5 times. And well, the 1 year old is a 1 year old, he just doesn't get
Mhm.
either or.
Yep.
So that was one of the factor that she's like, it changed, it totally changed. And it did grow. Like the ADHD factor, I had it all my life, but the traits were not as developed. And now it's above and beyond, which is just another adaptation too. But I was very proud of serving, I think, and then I was very proud of my uniform. Doesn't matter if it was good within the culture or not. Extremely proud of it. And I would come back home, and I had a goal. And I think that's one of the big thing that we have to look into or talk is the fact that you have a goal. You get up every morning and you say, well, I'm going to go that way now. And we're very tangible people, right? We're St. Thomas, right? I'm not religious, but St. Thomas is the one who put his finger through the whole, so the Bible say, the whole of Jesus to believe that it was actually Jesus after he's dead. Um, and and it's kind of a similar thing for cops. We need to have tangible proof, facts to actually charge someone. Um, but when it comes to looking at your own injury and it's invisible, well, your breakthrough are also invisible. So it's very hard sometimes to see and acknowledge that you are improving. So you feel like you're in a dark place for a very long time until the breakthrough are kind of piling up. And now you realize, okay, I'm getting out of that hole, right? The Alice in
Yep.
Wonderland hole, I'm coming out. But this also will bring you with hardship through that recovery, which you're alone. The second part that I realized is I was attended a lot of the peer support group,
Mhm.
and peer support groups I think are fantastic, above and beyond fantastic, as long as you don't diminish your communication at home. Because peer support, I can sit around, it's a 10 person who all served, and we all know what we sees, what we have been seeing, what the street looks like, what war looks like, or whatever the may be. So you don't have to explain. That's what I've been through, and
Yep.
this is how I feel right now. Everyone, because trauma is trauma, feel the kind of the same. Now, I don't believe that there's worse trauma or there easier or softness trauma, because we're all different. Trauma or trauma, so let's just paint it the same color. I think it's what you do after it to recover that change things. Because someone can have one accident and be traumatized for life. Meanwhile, a traffic cop will attend thousands of traffic of collision, and there's no problem,
Mm.
right? Or so they say. So the problem that I had, first thing first, was a group peer support. Is sitting there was feeling so good for 3 hours. Coming back home, I was angry to say anything. Why don't you understand like they do, right?
Hmm.
And the truth is, she never wore a uniform. So how could she understand something I don't speak about? Because personally, I would keep those things inside, whatever I've seen during the day, so I don't bring injury home. What I quite fast realize is you bring work at home that you wanted or not. I don't believe that nobody brings nothing at home after work. That you're jumpy because you just had something or you've been into a fight. That is whatever it could be, physical injury, it could be mental injury because something you've seen, could be that you just actually someone is choking and you're doing CPR and so on and so forth, right? And you survive, they survive. Then you get home and your child choke. You might see that person, aka you bring home what you've been exposed to. So the non-communication can be extremely toxic for a relationship, and that's what I kind of jumped on. So that's kind of what the bus started at home, where it was not fantastic for me, and she had to discover someone else. She had to remind me a few times, you got to speak to me, I'm here.
Yep.
If you keep me in the dark, I will not be able to help you. And I'm like, you're not a psychologist, you don't understand anything, right? Go away.
Yeah.
And the truth is she's not a psychologist, but she's the one who see the most of me.
Yep.
And she's the one who can support me the most if I bring her around. And if you look at our two trades that we did, so policing and military, they're the highest with divorce rates, the two of them, right? And then I think
Hmm.
it's firefighter, if I remember correctly, something like this. All of that to say, they're not easy job, but if we don't learn how to speak, we're gonna end up in the same thing for sure. The rate's gonna be high and higher, and so on and so forth. Same as they're the highest for PTSD, technically, right? Because of what we're exposed. So let's not forget this. So those are kind of the key cue that started. I cannot tell you for my kid um what he's been exposed, because the new one I'm pretty stable, but the previous one, I would literally, like, we had to send him to daycare. Why? Because I had dissociation. And what I mean by dissociation, I could sit on a couch and lose a full hour. Right. So when I
Yeah.
realized that, it was I think a span of 14 hours, we found a daycare, kids go to daycare. Boom. That way safer there than safer with me. And it's not that I would have hurt the kid, but because I was losing track of time. And the reason why I had dissociation is because my brain was becoming overwhelmed. Then the body was becoming overwhelmed because of the brain, the feelings. And then that was shutting down. That was not
Yeah.
working. The body was breathing, like was working as it should work, but the rest was not efficient. My wife could tell me, I talked to you 5 times and you answer in the space of an hour, and I would not recall anything. So it did change our life. Nowadays, I mean, I would not leave the home either. So when we say now, like, would you like to go for a date? Right? It used to be a big thing for me. And we didn't have date for 3 years, 4 years, 3 years for sure. Which is kind of
Mm.
insane when you think about it, because that means you don't take care either of your relationship, and what you're playing is only dad and mom.
Yep.
So you're kind of losing track of what is going on there. And I mean, if you don't love yourself, how can you love someone else? I don't know for you, I did not like myself at all in recovery. I felt like I was a crappy cop because I was leaving my team back, right? I I was angry at the police job because unconsciously I was telling myself, you didn't have that in the military. It's the police fault,
Yeah.
right? And truthfully, it's a bunch of things altogether. But I was losing track of who I am.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting part is when I think you rediscover who you are. And that's before your spouse saying, you're not the same guy.
Oh,
Uh,
big time. Yeah. I've heard that. I mean, I've heard that so many times over the last, oh, probably year and a half, John.
mm,
Yeah. And
mm,
so I'll expand on what you're saying there, because when we were talking about leaving the uniform, this is the package deal that your family gets.
yep.
You know, all of the things that you're saying about loss of memory and the dissociation and incapable of caring for your child at home, even though you're sitting at home.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all real. And that's a hard part because, you know, like we said at the beginning, you didn't go into this job to destroy your family or your
Nope.
marriage or to create trauma in your children, you know, by way of them sort of absorbing the job vicariously through you, right? So your family, one of the key things that I've realized that I have to do is I have to recover my family. I have to recover my relationship with my wife. This whole idea, and it's still a struggle. I mean, still to this day, when my wife says, you know, I don't know who you are anymore, or I don't recognize you, there is a little bit of that's actually painful for her,
Yeah.
right? Because we lived in a pattern, we had a habit, you know, for the first 9 years of our life, we slowly just created the same habits.
Mm-hmm.
And in that habit forming process, I was slowly deteriorating. I was slowly getting worse and worse. And I was doing my best to hide it because it came to quite a surprise um, for a lot of people when I like waved the white flag. A lot of people kind of were in shock, like, what? Well, you did a real good job at hiding that, or they didn't believe me, or whatever. Um, and even for my wife, she already, like I said, I think in the previous episode, she already knew something was going on. She just didn't know how bad. And I had done such a good job at hiding how serious it was behind the scenes until the very end. Um, that it was just the pattern. It was just the habit. Like, okay, I married a guy and now we're drinking lots. Now we're sitting on the deck having way more drinks. Now we're sleeping in more. Now we're procrastinating because he's tired. Now we're not doing all the chores that we need to be doing when we're on our days off because he's exhausted and he's seen a lot of trauma. And so there was a lot of excusing of the negative parts of my personality and my characteristics that were coming about because of the trauma. And I didn't see any of it, and my wife certainly didn't. So that's part of the package deal. And I go and I turn now to my kids. I think I'm lucky that my two youngest kids probably won't really ever remember me as a policeman. They haven't really seen me in uniform very much. My daughter was quite young, so um, oh crap. Can we pause? Fuck.
All right. So we had like a little problem
We had a
with
little technical problem.
yes. So we're like, this is the one other thing, right? We're dad at home right now.
Yeah, yeah,
And the school called, and I mean, for Jason, and I'm not gonna lie, I have like right here, I have a little monitor for my kids sleeping. So keep on
yeah,
going, Jason. Because
yeah.
we're on a
So
good
we
one.
got yeah, we got interrupted, but basically, I think I was kind of going to the place where leaving the uniform and the evolution afterwards is a total package. And just to summarize, because I kind of lost my train of thought, it was the school phoning. My son has been sick. I was worried about it. So in real life, this is what happens. You know, this isn't like this isn't Hollywood. This is like you said, I'm a stay-at-home dad right now.
Mhm.
And I want to get to that. So yeah, John, you and I, and for everybody out there who's struggling, your spouse is going to be the one who's affected. Your children are going to be the one who's affected. Yes, I have been affected. Yeah, you have been affected, but so are they.
Mhm.
And that's one of the key components to this is not only do you have to recover you, at some time, once you get your feet on the ground and once you start to really make progress, you have to start recovering some relationships in your life.
Yeah.
And so uh, I wish it wasn't like that, but the fact remains that my wife is connected to me and we really take our marriage vows seriously. So it's in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. And
See,
it was
you're
pretty bad for a while, right? So, and nobody supports my wife. She doesn't get to go to therapy. She doesn't get people saying, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be all right." She's in behind the scenes constantly, or was constantly helping repair me, constantly picking me up off the ground and worrying about me. And so she now I have to help her recover from that, because really she's been, I'm not going to say she has PTSD from this, but definitely she's been mentally affected in a negative way where it has
Mhm.
caused her a lot of grief. It really has.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, and that's the other thing, right? So I've been with Wire Differently. I've been talking to spouses at times,
Yep.
and I don't mix a chance to tell them thanks for your service. And most of them are like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You have no idea how much of a root you are of this family." Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, this is the other thing, right? Like with the loss of memories or dissociation or whatever you want to call it, or drinking too much through being, blackout, you might forget, but they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is where, like, I mean, falling in love, which you again is part of it. I don't know for you, but I had to test for antidepressant, antipsychotic, sleeping pills, mood stabilizer, and they all have side effects, right? One gain weight, but one in my sleep I'd be violent because I'm stuck in my terrors.
Yeah.
And I don't remember anything because I sleep well. But I wake up to someone who's in total fear because she got kicked, because she got grabbed, because whatever the nightmare got me to. Um, or she also told me once, she's like, I walk on eggshell in my house because she did not know what would set me off.
Oh yeah.
Or set me off, sorry. And same as at the beginning, I don't know for you, going to therapy would set me off for 2 days.
Yep, 100%. Oh yeah. Like
Right?
I used to go to therapy. I used to try to go to therapy on a day trip because I got to travel 4 hours one way in order to just to get to see a therapist. And so that usually includes a stay in a hotel and meals, and it's a 12-hour day by the end of it. And when my therapy was in its initial phases, if I came home right afterwards, I was a total wreck.
Yeah.
And so I started on purpose doing an overnight stay so that I could diffuse, so that I could go to therapy and offload all kinds of terrible stuff. And then I could have not just the drive home, but like an overnight in a hotel, or a lunch somewhere, or sitting in a library, or going and cooling off in the city, so that I could, kind of regain my composure before I came home. Because I recognized, just like you said, and my wife would say this, I'd like to have our wives on someday so they can really tell the truth, and truth, so that it doesn't matter if it's hurting my feelings of what they're saying, but
Yeah.
the reality of how they were feeling. Yeah, she's had to walk on eggshells. I mean, there's no easier way, or no better way to put it. It was, you become kind of a ticking time bomb when you're not in your right mind, and you're not in control of these emotions that can just explode forth with pain. And so you lash out verbally, and you get really angry, and you're slamming doors, and I can recall, and I'm still working on this. This is sort of a residual thing, that raising my voice at my kids was always the thing to do. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that was because I had to yell at bad guys all the time, or if it was just because I was so exhausted mentally and physically that I thought that that would be the way to shut everything down, so that I could at least go back to some semblance of peace. And these are the recovery things that I have to work on. I have to work on developing these new skills where I don't do that, because that was my default setting.
Yeah.
And that default setting sort of carried on into my recovery phase. And I'm in the recovery phase now of getting through these things. And, I have to do that recovery with my wife. Like you said, we have to rekindle romance and intimacy, and friendship, and trusting each other, and her trusting my feelings. And I wrote some things down, and I want to get to one of the things that we were talking about too, which is recovery exhaustion, because that's a big thing. But our spouses wear this as much as we do, John. And I think that really needs to be said out loud, and it needs to be recognized in everybody that they need their help as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Um, I'll push it even further because I'm gonna link it to something else, and it's gonna make me sound like I was really useless during 2 years, but it's fine because it's kind of a reality that we faced at home. I have a bunch of friends who are coaches and so on and so forth, life coach and whatnot, who works with intelligence and so they can read people. Let's go with
Yep.
that term. And two of them showed up at my home, and we talked, and we go for a hike, or we go for a rucksack march, because that dopamine hit made me calmer, sweeter, nicer.
Hmm.
um and the two of them brought up at one point, your wife has a very masculine way of being. And I was like, what are you talking about? I did not marry like a masculine woman. And the truth is she had to change. She had to wear two hats. I was not gone. I was there, AWOL, mentally, physically present, but she had to wear the two hats for that little boy to grow and have, like, that kind of frame and so on, until I'm able to wear my men hat again.
Yeah.
Not that I was wearing any other, I had no hat. I was just not there. I was AWOL in my body. And slowly right now, which is super interesting, and I can notice it, she's taking off that hat. She doesn't need it, right?
Hmm.
She's going back to her old self, or just herself, because I don't think she can go back to the old self. There's stuff that happened in life where either she adapt, or she doesn't. Um and from there, but that hat is not needed, right? So now we can
Yeah.
remove that masculine side that women don't have, but she had to gather, or create, if you wish, which was extremely interesting to see. And at first, I was insulted. I'll be honest with you. My friends
Oh
telling me
man,
this,
yeah,
and I'm
that's a
like,
good one.
"What
Yeah.
are you talking about? Like, I'm not a man enough." And I'm like, that's kind of the first thought you have, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying your spouse is having a side of her, one that is feminine and one that is masculine. And the question is, why is that? And the why was because I was not there.
Yeah.
Um which which is the domino effect, right? One hit the other one, the other one, and the other one, and the other one. And some people, I mean, we have no family here, but I remember like it was night and day, because when I got sick was at the beginning of COVID. So we didn't see any family flying here for 2 years.
Yep.
And then my in-laws showed up, and like you said, being angry, screaming, and so on. I remember talking to them and explaining how my brain function now, which is interesting at it was going. And I'm like, there's a hole in the wall upstairs. Your daughter was not around. Your grandson was not around. I needed to hurt somewhere else than my head. So my reaction is, I'm gonna hit there. Happened it was a stud. So I bled, and it just stopped hurting there because physically took over, and I had to take care of it. And it was that, which just sounds extremely ridiculous, but at that time, it made sense. I needed to stop this from screaming, right?
Hmm.
Same as when we talk about suicide. I don't think suicide is a coward action. I don't think that the person give up on life. I think the person just want to stop the pain, right? So it does not make sense how we think, because, well, there's a reason, like with the chemicals in our brains are mixed up. That's kind of what happens with mental health, right? And that's why you get like the antipsychotic and the antidepressant and so on and so forth. The chemical will readjust slowly. So yeah, the side effects of medication is a big thing. I mean, it affects the family and so on and so forth. Uh, the other thing, and I don't know for you, because I mean, we talked about goals in life. Now, um, you and I talked about it when we chat just for the fun of it. I'm like, I'm not made to be home.
Hmm.
We said
Yeah.
that. And,
Yeah.
and, and I mean, why? I love being away. I love when the military said, like, you're gone for the next this amount of time. And I was like, yay, like, I'm going to miss my wife
Yep.
because I'm going to miss being home. Now I'm at home every day. and,
Yeah.
and I don't really miss her, but I miss having a goal. Yes, having a goal is me feeling better. I get that, right? But bringing the bread at home, doing what I'm supposed to do, like I used to do, that I miss that.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Because I know when my son's like, "So, daddy, what's your day?" And I'm like, "He did the vacuum and prepped the dinner." Oh, you didn't do much? And the kid doesn't know, right? They're 5 years old.
Yeah.
So, you didn't do much today, dad? Well, I don't know. We have three dogs. It's a lot of vacuuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
but the truth is you're missing having a goal, because the injury is also invisible. So the goal is kind of invisible. And we don't know if we're going to go back to work in a normal setting. right?
Yeah.
Because maybe the PTSD brought you to a fact that you can keep your, let's say, focus for 3 hours at a time. That means you cannot do it 8 to 4. And how does it feel that it's at 40 years old, you cannot work like the rest of the society? Right?
Hmm.
And I met people who are like, yeah, I get you got trauma, but why don't you go back to work?
Yeah. And that's the recovery exhaustion. That's like the compassion fatigue that
Yeah.
we were talking about on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's John, that was such a good point. I have seen only maybe twice in the last several years where I've heard what you said there, about how when a woman is with a man who is either incapable of masculinity or
Mm-hmm.
isn't masculine for whatever reason, and that, oh, we could kind of chop that nuance into bits, but
Yeah.
I had the exact same thing going on, and how emasculated I felt when what would happen was, and so I live on a farm. All the chores are masculine, right?
Yeah.
They all require an element of physicality, and they're dirty and they stink, and there's a lot of effort involved. And my wife is a rock star. She's a little powerhouse. However, I'm the man. It's in me. It feels like it's in me to do those things. And we got this farm, and then about 5 months after we bought the farm, I was off work. I found myself off work finally. And over the last year and a half, I've had many incidents where I procrastinated on something I needed to do, one of my chores, because I'm the stay at home person. And my wife sees I haven't done it, gets frustrated with me, and then goes and does it or gets her father to do it. And now I either have my wife doing my job, or I have my father in law, another man, coming to do my job. And it really diminished me. And I was really ashamed at ever admitting this for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the truth. And it is really real that if you can't provide the masculine part of the relationship, then a woman will default to becoming more masculine to fill those shoes,
Yeah.
especially when you've got children and you've got things that would be classically defined as masculine jobs around the house, or things that men would be more apt to want to do. Yeah, the woman has to take on that role, and it happened here, and it really diminished me. It took a lot of time to overcome that sense. And I wanted to get onto something else about being a stay-at-home dad, and that your job is vacuuming and doing the house chores, and that it doesn't feel like who you are.
Yeah.
One of the things that people don't tell us, and my psychologist finally got around to telling me this because I was bitching at him. I was complaining about being at home all the time and feeling like I was a like a rudderless ship or a sailboat with no sail,
Yeah.
just being kind of blown around and doing whatever. Um, no, being a stay-at-home dad is not my thing. I do not desire to be a stay-at-home dad where my job is, or my life is fulfilled with just the duties of being in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what a lot of people don't tell you. And in therapy, it takes a while to get there. I think if you have the wrong therapist, you have to repurpose your why for a while. You have to accept a new short-term destiny,
Yes.
right? It's not forever, but it feels like it when you're in it, because all of the stuff I have to do on the farm, even if I, let's just say that I don't have a farm, even if I just lived in town, even if I lived in a small house with a small yard,
Yep.
that's my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
My purpose is to recover, is to rehab, rebuild, and become better so that I'm better for me, better for my wife, better for my kids. And then that trickles down uh, through society, and everybody's better for it. And it's really difficult to retool yourself to be I don't want to say mundane, because there's nothing mundane about being a stay-at-home parent.
No.
It's a real challenge, honestly,
And I
especially in
think
the
it's
summertime.
important. It's important to
Yeah.
say we're not saying that woman is it's her role, it's the role of women's to be at home, because I know a bunch of women who don't do that, who cannot
Yeah,
stay
that's
at home,
fine. I'm all
right?
about that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm the dad who's been included at the bus stop, because it's usually just women who drop off their kids,
Yep.
and so they called me the honorary mom, anyways, in the group, which is kind of
Oh
funny.
yeah. Yeah.
But I was talking to one of them who's work full times, and she's like, I tried with my first child to stay home and I couldn't. Right.
Yeah.
So there's no sex. It's not what we're talking about. I think it's some people are fulfilled doing it, and some people are fulfilled doing something else. Right. Same as I know people who are fulfilled driving forklift, and it would not fulfill me.
Yeah.
So I just
Well,
wanted to make that nuance clear that it's not
yeah.
a sex aspect. It's more a person drive. I'm not made for this. Now, you know what my psychologist actually asked me when I brought up, well, I'm vacuuming, cleaning the house, and she said, what were you doing before? Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, I would work 8 to 4 or 3 to 3 or 7 to 3, whatever that is. And yeah, but when you get home, I'd be vacuuming and cooking food. She's like, you're doing the same, just minus 8, 12 hours of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you complaining about? And I was like, well, yeah, well, I have difficulty doing it.
Well, and
That's the thing.
there's a whole host of reasons there, John. I just want to go right back because
Sorry. Yeah.
I want to make sure that everybody knows I have learned to have the utmost of respect for stay-at-home parents,
Mm-hmm.
man or woman. Okay, because I had a bias against it, thinking that it was a cakewalk for a long time. This was a real immature, yeah, it was a real immature viewpoint on life that if you were the stay-at-home parent, you had it easy.
Mm-hmm.
There are days at home with my 3 children where I wished I was out on the street doing police work. See, I'm
Yep.
serious. And all the stay-at-home moms and dads out there that are listening, they will concur with me.
Yeah.
It's not an easy job. Um, I I really empathize with people who are stay-at-home parents and who embrace it and find fulfillment in it because it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is something that you have to retool yourself to consider that this is what you're doing and this is the role you're fulfilling now. And going back to the masculine thing, the
Mm-hmm.
masculinity thing, I've gotten back to getting shit done. Just pardon my language. We're not supposed to swear. Getting stuff done now on time because I don't want my wife to be burdened with that. Now, what's going on? It's not role reversal because my wife and I have both always worked, but she's working and she's working extra because I worked overtime shifts to make extra money for us.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's doing that. Now she's working full time and she's got another part time job and she goes and she waitresses at Boston Pizza once or twice a week to make some extra money, which I would have normally done if I was on the job. And so that's another challenge for me that I see that my wife is going through the stressor, the physical and mental stress of working a lot more hours. I used to take that on and I enjoyed that role and I had no trouble fulfilling that role and I had no trouble working a lot of extra hours. It didn't diminish me.
Yep.
Had I not had the mental health challenges that were also causing me grief, working 30, 40 extra hours a week doesn't bother me. I
Yep.
enjoy working. I really like to work hard. I really like to be out of the house doing my job.
It
It's not
also
to say
kept
I,
you away from your head, though.
yeah, well, of course. I mean, there were times when that was the distraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I wanted to put that caveat in there. I think I lost track on what we were saying, but
But
I
yeah, no,
don't
you're
want
right.
people thinking, I don't want people thinking that I'm saying that women should be stay at home. That's not the point at all. I personally am not designed to be a stay at home parent.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to be in the work environment. Now, I do have a bit of a work environment that I'm working on now at home, which is nice. And farming is kind of like work. It's got some physical challenges and stuff. So I do have things to do, and I have been able to retool myself here, but I am not calibrated for this. I am doing it because it's my circumstances, and I'm going to try and do it the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I am not calibrated for be at home. I am calibrated to do a job, to commit to doing something outside of my home.
Yeah. And that's what we're doing, right? I think the part of it is reinventing yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of a new quest will be probably eventually a subject in another podcast. But part of it is to accept that that won't happen again, right? I
Yeah.
seeked for it before. I mean, I was offered a job to go back to the unit I was part of, and I told my wife, like, can I go? And she's like, no. And then I was like, okay, well, I could probably try contracting overseas. And she's like, no, you have 2 kids, a wife. It's a no, because I missed this. Now, I won't say that it was uncomfortable, I won't say it was comfortable. It was something that I know how it works. And like every domestic relationship that are good or bad, the toxic part, you get comfortable with it. So
Mhm.
reinventing yourself, what I had, I think, to realize is, well, what are my values now? That because like we spoke before, there's some that never change, right? The service is kind of part of who I am. So how do I do that now? Well, it's easy. That kind of podcast where we speak and we're talking about, you're not alone. I live this crap as well. You might be in your basement hiding because you're afraid that someone is following you because your brain is doing loops and loops and loops. I hope you hear me out here. We've been through this
Yep.
and we're like out of that hole now. If not, we would not speak like this. If not, we would not try to tell you, listen, it's going to be a harsh time and it's going to be dark as hell, but you're going to get out of it. And I strongly believe this. Anyone who gets into it and put their heart to it will get out of it. There's there's scars that you're going to get out of it, like everything,
Yep.
but there's more positive than negative to it. Um, are we? I think like it's 11th of November is coming up, right? And I mean that will probably air later or after that, but um, it's for me, it's a dark day. It's a hard day to be out there. I think about friends and think about stuff, but it's a good day. It is okay to have feelings as well. I rather having feelings than being numb. So there's
Yep.
positive, right? There, and I don't think you're strong to not have no feelings. I think actually it's a weakness because if you cut off every feelings, where's the human part,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that you have to learn that. That's part of the evolution of leaving the uniform is you've got to redevelop a whole host of things that you shut off. For the longest time, I was lacking empathy. Um, and we'll get to compassion fatigue and recovery exhaustion, I think, which is a good subject. We're almost
Yeah,
going to be getting close to time here. So, um, yeah, you got to retool it all. The evolution when you're leaving the uniform is that, and we said it about our spouses not recognizing us. It, it's the drug addict who goes to rehab and then goes back to his drug addict friends to hang out.
yeah,
Won't work.
yeah,
Well, I'm talking on an individual level. The drug addict group of friends that I hang out with were all my old habits,
yeah,
were all my old patterns. That's where the toxic familiarity and the comfort of that toxicity lies is in my old habits and how easy it to fall back into that because it feels so comfortable even after you've gotten to a point where you're recovering well and you're on the path to growth.
mm-hmm.
It's so simple to slip right back into
Yeah,
that. And that's why the metamorphosis really has to be completed. Like it has to be, I think it has to be 100% from top to bottom. You know, change the way you move, you change the way you eat, the change the way that you digest social media, you change the news you watch, you change the people that you hang out with, you change the way that you treat your spouse and your children, you change the clothes you wear. Like it literally is a change. 100%. It's a caterpillar to butterfly
yeah,
for
yeah,
lack of a better cliche way of explaining this. Um, and we talked, and so I want to end right there and go right into recovery exhaustion and compassion fatigue,
yeah.
because what we were saying offline when we were prepping for this was I have recovery exhaustion right now. I'm sick and effing tired of it. I just want to say rip the band-aid off, put me back out somewhere and let me go.
Mm-hmm.
But I did that once and it
Yeah,
didn't work.
yeah,
It crashed and burned because I wasn't there. And so now I've learned, I've gained a little bit of wisdom. On top of having recovery exhaustion, those around you may start to experience compassion fatigue. And it's not compassion fatigue like what police officers can experience by stopping, um,
caring.
yes, by stopping caring about the people that they deal with. It's the people that are caring for you as you're going through your trauma. And I would say not my spouse and not my children for the most part, but the people that are sort of on the next level of gravity in my view, in my little circle of life.
Yeah,
I start hearing things like, "Oh, you're still off work." Still not recovered yet? Oh, you still going to the psychologist? Oh, it's been 2 years. Are you working now? Aren't you not back to work? And people get it feels like people get sick and tired of hearing that you're still off work. And then I don't know if this is true. It's probably more in my mind, and and you can answer this for
Sure.
yourself. I'm curious about it. I wonder if the people at the office are actually thinking the way that I think they're thinking about me. Like if they're actually like, oh, he's on a fucking 2 year vacation, must be nice. Because I think that way. There's a voice in my head that used not anymore.
Yeah.
I'm much better at that. But when I
Yeah.
was at my worst, that's what it was like, right? Because that's the words that were used in the office when we would talk about people. Oh, they're on a vacation,
Yeah.
you know, getting extra time off. And I
So
wonder,
yeah.
I'll get you. I just want to know. I wonder if it's really real that they're saying that, or if I just think they're saying that. And it's probably just I think they're saying that.
I think there's a mix because I think it's a culture, number one. Saying
Yeah,
this is a culture. It's part of the old mind culture. I think they're breaking through right now with some of that understanding of mental health more and more. Like the new kids coming on the job, like the 25 years old and the 20
yeah,
years old who get in have been more exposed to mental health because it has been brought up in school. So I think there's that. Because I mean, I've seen that in the military, I've seen that in the policing, right?
yeah.
Um, I I'll tell you, and this is kind of a relief. I don't give a poop. I don't give
Mm-hmm.
a rat's bum, whatever politely I can say.
Yeah,
But there's a difference between you and I. I give them my resignation,
that's right.
right? And I actually went towards like I dropped salary. I went for Veterans Affair where I find that the mental health was better taken care of. Um, and honestly, I think I speak to two or three from the service still. Um, they give me good respect when I speak with them. They say that they're aware of that and so on and so forth. So good. That's all I take. I don't want to hear anyone else. And truthfully, in my head, I know I'm way better off right now than I was then. Because this is a I agree with the compassion fatigue, right? Like I'm thinking about my wife, and actually I will ask her when she comes back. I will probably say, "You sick of Veil Pill Me?" I'm gonna ask her because I mean it's been since 2019 that I'm off work, right?
Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time she's supporting me, but in that support, there's for sure 2 years I was not able to support her. So
Mm-hmm.
giving without receiving, you empty your tank quite fast,
Yeah,
right? Because this is what friendship is, relationship is I fuel your tank, you fuel my tank, right? You teach me something, I teach you something.
it's a
Usually,
reciprocal agreement. Yeah,
there's not a one-way thing. If it's a one-way thing, it is not a relationship. If it's a one-way thing, it's not a friendship. There's no such things,
yeah.
right? So I'd be interested. I'll let you know in the next podcast we record because I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
ask her. But do I care about what people think? Not really at that point. I know there's another thing that was brought up from a military friend, and he's like, "Have you ever thought that you actually miss the boys, right?" And I didn't feel that in the policing aspect, although it was city police, so it's a different thing than yours, when you guys are up north nowhere, right? And
Yeah,
you're very you're a squadron at that point. You're a unit where you need the buddy, you need the buddy who's going to back you up, and so on and so forth. But the military part, I can tell you, I miss the guys and the
oh yeah,
guys and gals and whatever. The relationship, the family aspect, the closest enough, the support. Um, which as of today, it's funny because I still try to help people and being positive and so on. And when someone tells me that they're totally dysregulated, I'm like, okay, well, this is what you're gonna do next. You're gonna go outside as an example. I tried that last year. It worked super well. You put your 2 feet in the snow. It's gonna be burning because it's cold, and you breathe. Do that for 5 minutes or 3 minutes. Go inside. You're gonna be grounded, right? So I was
yeah.
talking about that to someone, and I'm like, if you need, you call me. Then we're gonna speak and cool down your anxiety, right? I'm still serving. That fills me up.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's a
yeah,
that's a good way to conclude this. I think we can speak on that
Yeah.
we still serve.
Yeah.
And in order to leave the uniform, I think that's one of the things that we have to find, John. I hate to cut you off. I was trying to interject there so I could get in the point because you made a
Go
good
ahead.
point. That's the point though. Like I live to serve.
Yep.
I dedicated half my life, and you've dedicated many, probably close to half your life as well, to
More.
serving. It's in
Yeah, around that. Yeah.
it's in us, right?
Yeah.
And so I probably won't ever wear my uniform again. In fact, I can say that with certainty now. I won't ever put my uniform on again. I'm still an active member. I still have a badge. I'm still on the payroll. But I've left the uniform behind for very serious personal reasons, and same goes to you.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
But we still want to serve, right?
Yeah.
And so leaving the badge, like that's sort of like I think that can cap off this cake. That's the cake topper. Is you got to find a way to serve. You have to retool that purpose. You have to find that new why. Why are you serving, and what are you serving now, and how are you going to go and serve in a different way, in a different capacity?
I think just to pinpoint exactly, it's when you realize that the uniform did not make you, but you made the uniform, it's when you win. Because
Absolutely.
you started that job because you wanted to protect and serve, right? Um, and that is first responder, that is military, that is whatever the hell maybe. I see that most people who do the job, it's not a power trip. It's actually to help serve and protect. So
Yep.
when you realize that you're not a super medic because you wear a blue shirt with green line on it, you're a super medic because you are a super person. And I'm not going to say this just to make the ego of a medic super big. It's because this is you who made that uniform. You fill up those boots, you fill up those shirts, pants, and so on and so forth. If you have integrity and you don't lie and you keep on going and you serve the people with the best interest, right? And sometimes the best interest will lead you into fights, right? So sadly, that's kind of what happened. But it's because you created that uniform,
Yeah.
not the service. The service is just a patch on your shoulder, it's a badge, and so on and so forth. If, as a cop, you did your job properly, as best as you can, and you serve and protect your district, your area where you're serving, it's not because your uniform is fantastic. It's because you're a good person at first. And when you realize that you're that good person, your values are I serve because it fuels my bucket. You're going to find
Yep.
something to serve all over again. That is feeding the poor, that is helping homeless, that is building home for whatever the hell reason. This is your reason of being, not the uniform.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to further your point, because I think you made it very clear, the uniform is just the wrapping paper, right? And it can feel very weird to see your gifts without the wrapping paper on them first,
Yeah.
right? Because it can seem like it's just a plain box. But you're right that we are all the gift, and the uniform is just the cover.
Yeah.
And so we can go out into the world and we can find a new way to serve without having those flashes, without having hooks on our shoulders, without putting all the cool. And I'll tell you this just as we're finishing. I really miss getting kitted up. I really miss wearing the tools. I loved the feeling of those tools. There was a sense of like being a Swiss Army knife,
Yeah.
having all these awesome things. Um, but now there's new tools, and you develop those new tools by looking at the all of the stuff that you learned on along the way. I call it stuff because I couldn't label it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
But man, oh man, do you learn a lot
Yeah.
in the military, in policing. And you learn a lot, not just in skills like self defense or tactics or firearms. You learn the inner workings of the human heart and the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter if you're wearing a uniform or not, you get to keep those superpowers forever, and you can
Yeah.
repurpose those to serve outside the uniform.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. 100%. And that opened to a whole butt of conversation because we learn a different language. We learn how to read people.
Yeah.
right? I think we said it in the last podcast that we talked about. But I was traveling in Saskatchewan with two RCMPs retired. One who used to be in drugs, not doing drugs, in drug units, and the other
Yeah.
one was TAC. And it was 9 o'clock at night. I saw probably a 45 years old cycling a BMX, and I'm like, this is a drug dealer. There's no way in hell 45 years old man on a BMX at midnight is just having a little ride. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen because I've been exposed to this here. Same as, minivans. I don't think it's a soccer mom at midnight, especially if it's a crappy minivan, right? It's someone who needs something with a lot of space that can tint the window and you're not seeing what's going in it. That's what I took out of some events, things that you won't unsee.
Yep.
And sometimes I wish I could remove that. I gotta say, I love what I learned, man. I'm not gonna take that away. But because it's in our own backyard, sometimes I wish I would see the backyard as a safer place for our kids. I don't care that something happened to me. I care that something happened to them or any kids, right?
Yeah.
For that matter. So I think that's sometimes the positive and negative on knowledge, right? There's a positive on knowing this because now I'm more suspicious of. I'm not going
Yeah.
to walk by that person or I'm going to just take some distance. But the negative is, well, it could affect someone else that I love as a person, as a
Yeah.
father, as a husband, or whatever the hell maybe. So those are the things, right? But we can visit that on something different. We did not say it this time, but please share, like, subscribe. It help us. People can see the video better. The algorithm loves us more. The YouTube don't block us because we're in Canada and there's censorship. Anyhow, so it's been a pleasure, man, as per usual.
Yeah, it was a fun one. Folks, we're just getting started. Give us a chance to figure things out. I don't know anything about computers or podcasting, but I'm learning. And Jon is only slightly better at this than I am because
Yeah.
he's been doing it just a little bit longer. But we have some amazing topics coming up. We have uh, an incredible guest list that's being formulated behind the scenes, Jon.
Yeah.
And I really think it's going to be great as we evolve out of the uniform.
Yep. And the next guest is
We're not going
Seb.
to say.
Oh, you don't want to say? Okay, I was going to say
Oh,
so. I'm
you,
gonna
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
gonna
you're gonna
beep
have to edit
myself
that
right
one.
there. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
beep.
yep, yeah. We're
Yeah.
gonna pass this, but don't
The
miss out
first
on that
guest is
one.
a rock star. The first guest, I'll
Yep.
just say, is an absolute rock star, and I can't wait for it.
I
So,
mean, he shut us up for a good 10 seconds. He did.
yeah,
So it's worth it. Like watch it. It's a long one, another hour or so, but
yeah.
it's a totally worth one. So, anyways, keep in mind we're gonna be back next week with another episode and tune in, please.
Peace.
Bye.